Revolutionary greetings to everybody watching our podcast today. This is our second episode that we're doing, where the episode is focusing on the International Working Women's Day, its revolutionary historical origins, and also the importance of it. Today, we have on our guest, Comrade Matapelo, who is the National Treasurer of NEHAW. She also is in the COSATU Gender Streaming Coordinator. We also have Comrade Dineo Majavu, who is the National Committee member of the Young Communist League SA. She is also an activist in the district of Linda Jabane. She's the chairperson, I think acting chairperson of Linda Jabane in the district, and also a PEC member. Welcome everybody. Just before we begin, Comrade Matapelo, the International Working Women's Day takes its origin from the labor movement. Can you take us down the origins coming from the 1910 Second International Working Women's Conference, where it was proposed, and also on its radical role that it's playing on today?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. My name is actually KGOMOTSO MAKHUPOLA. As you have indicated, I'm the National Office Bearer of NEHAW and the National Office Bearer designate into gender, but also the National Deputy Secretary of COSATU, and also I'm sitting on the women's structure of the World Federation of Trade Unions. Now, in terms of the International Working Day, its origin started in 1911, and obviously it was then changed or celebrated on the 8th of March, which is what we are going to be talking about today. And I think in terms of its importance is for us to look at where are we in terms of women issues, because in the main we talk about women issues when we see challenges which we seem to be, afraid to confront, and us not confronting these challenges, they will forever be with us. And we should not all the time when we celebrate women's days, we then become, complaining as if we didn't know about those problems.
Thank you. I just want to bring into also the context of the 8th of March, as you touched about it. When one reads about it, it talks about the role of the women who were participating in the war, demanding bread and peace in the Russian Revolution, which also catapulted into the abdication of the Tsar from his office, and then also having Lenin declaring for the first time in Russia the right for women to vote. So the significance of 8th of March to a revolutionary woman, especially in participating on fighting for bread and peace and being in the forefront of the revolution. So I want us to take into the politics of the day, 8th of March, but also are we at a verge of it being depoliticized when it's a global celebration and it doesn't touch upon the impact or the influence of the women who took upon the streets to demand and fight for their right?
Protection. There are still challenges in that regard, because women are still confronted with situations where when they go on maternity leave, coming back to work, their jobs have been replaced by other people. That on its own begins to say women should not actually bear children. And it's something that we really think that we need to look at it and see how best can we actually address it. And that on its own is also making women to have conflict, because the person that would have actually replaced you as you go on maternity back will be another woman. So that it's a conflict that the employer in this regard is bringing on the table and make the work environment not to be conducive, particularly for women. And we also looked at the fact that we need to broaden this particular subject in terms of how best then do we then make sure that as a woman who is on maternity leave, the employer takes responsibility of paying that particular individual 100% of their salary. This thing of making women workers to go and queue in these departments, particularly for the UIF, which must pay you 75% of a salary, it is still another challenge that women are still facing, because that particular woman will still go back to work without having received that money. And it is something that we think that our government in particular must actually take this up and make sure that this particular matter gets addressed. We think that really the celebration of this day, it's something that really it makes us happy as women, but in terms of touching the things that we have long put on the table, the Beijing issue, are we really have we moved an inch in terms of implementing what we have actually fought for as women? The answer will be no.
Thank you on that. Comrade NT, I also just want to touch on the issue of the policies that we have in our country. We do have a Ministry of Women, Youth, and People Living with Disabilities. How has the department really addressed some of the issues that they are putting forth? Is there equal opportunity of employment for women? Because if you look at, first of all, the pay gap still is very wide, and even in South Africa, in regards of the pay gap between our male counterparts and ourselves. How is that being readdressed? Are we giving women more chance to participate in the economic space? And how, I think I would just pause there.
Thank you for the question. And I think the ministry is doing its level best. And I think we should actually applaud them in terms of the work that they are actually doing. But the big question which still remains is, are they getting enough support economically? Is the government pumping money into that ministry to make sure that young women and women in general are actually, benefiting from that particular ministry? And I don't think there is enough, funding towards that ministry to make sure that women are empowered, women are emancipated because of the budgetary constraints. I think that for me, it's something that we really need to take cognizance of, in making sure that, looking at the fact that women are the ones who are bringing the economy of the country up, they actually need to be taken into consideration, in particular that particular ministry.
Thank you. Comrade Dineo, I just want to have you pitch in on the access to reproductive health care for women. I know that the South African Communist Party's theme for this year is on reproductive rights. So if you can just pitch in on the health care in terms of the reproductive rights, the access to the health care, the services that perhaps need to be highlighted in terms of the 24-hour clinics, where they also offer pro-choice services for women who want to terminate for health reasons. Also, the sanitary dignity campaign that is going on, and also to touch on issues of the infertility that women face, and government is also has a program where now government is offering fertility treatment, which is very expensive and has been a very privatized entity that most women are unable to access.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, I think, this is a very important campaign. It's a very, very important campaign for a number of reasons, but because we're looking at International Working Women's Day, I thought maybe, when you think about the reproductive rights, and I saw a comment, I have to speak about this because I saw a comment on WhatsApp, and in the comment they were asking, is this a feminist idea or a communist idea? And I guess one of the reasons why it's important to fight for reproductive rights is that it gives an equal level playing field for everybody within the society. So once you have the ability to to decide on how or when you want to have children, on your health, because it's not just about wanting to have children or not wanting to have children, it's just your health, your well-being, your ability to be able to contribute to the production of society and production of your family and life in general. The reproductive rights are very important, and they actually deal with many issues. So it's definitely not a feminist-only concept, because yes, feminists speak about it, but definitely is communist as well, because it speaks to the heart of people living. So reproductive rights are about that. And when we speak about that as well, I'm reminded, because it's International Working Women's Day, which was born from working women's experiences. I'm specifically reminded of women within the mining sector who are affected by mercury and a number of other issues, and don't have toilets close to them and are unable to just get the necessary help. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, that prevents them from even being able to have children, because it's not a priority. So the access to or women that have been affected because of, we've spoken about climate change, not having access to clinics quite timelessly, not knowing if you have preeclampsia. I can't say that word. Yeah. But it's that condition where your legs are swollen and you have a lot of headaches and, high. And we've normalized these things because we've said, good, you don't need help. And unfortunately, yes, we have a better rate of people living throughout pregnancies, but we want to have people having choices. And the reproductive rights campaign of the party is basically saying, put the rights of people, the ability of choice, the ability to protect yourself, the ability to have a life beyond what you think going further. And I mean, yes, in Cuba, for instance, fertility is free. And this is, we look forward, we inspired by countries like Cuba. Infertility is not dealt with as a personal program, but rather a problem that we can all work with, that we can all be part of, because when it's fertility, we're all involved in one way or the other. But also the reproductive rights campaign speaks to other issues of the society. It speaks to the ownership of public goods. It speaks to the lack of commercialization of healthcare services. It speaks to the NHI having a health system that is not only accessible, but one that is communal, one that is able to deal with the day-to-day livings of people. So something that is accessible and free for people. But also on the last point in terms of the reproductive rights campaign is that it says let's socialize care work. Let's make it accessible. I read an article in the New York Times saying that Russian women are freer than the women in New York. You know why? Because it was just access. Mm-hmm. The women were able to come back home. In the morning she wakes up, she takes her child to a free crèche. Immediately after that, there's a subsidized coffee shop where she can afford, that has a subsidized laundromat that's right there, And then, so that means she's able to do her washing. She doesn't have to stress about that. And then she was able to have food, like groceries, good food that is accessible by the government. So by the time she comes back home and she tends to her children or to do this care work, she's able to focus on homework and building a culture that's very different. And that's essentially it is. We are focused on the reproduction of society because we acknowledge that the productive forces or capitalism is not only focused on the production on the shop floor. They want you to be reliant on it even outside of the shop floor. They want you to be in the chains of it even outside of the shop floor. So they're interested in the reproduction of society. That's why they make it difficult. They say, oh no, there must be a discovery that will fight against the public health care. They say that no, there must be ShopRite for you to buy food. You don't have to take off your trees. They reduce the reproductive aspects of society so that you don't even think of that. So, yeah.
On the topic, I want to get into the female circumcision that usually also results into the reproductive organs of women being mutilated, and which is a huge scourge in Africa and some of our southern parts. And there is a huge campaign against it from the comrades in Ethiopia and everywhere, where even people would literally take their kids out of the country of fear of that cultural practices, which then could damage the woman's reproductive organs. And the justification of the female circumcision is usually for male satisfaction. I don't know if we can touch around that, but also on intimate partner infringement on a person's right to prevent a pregnancy, because some women who are married, their husband would literally beat them up if they find out that they're actually preventing pregnancy after they notice that economically it's not viable to continue to have the amount of kids that are there, or they perhaps want to put on hold having kids so that they could look into their careers and all of those things, and how that affects on the reproductive rights of women.
Yeah, so thank you very much for that. Yeah, I mean, that's the issue of the mutilation is quite a really sensitive one because it speaks to a number of issues. One, it's this removal of agency to your reproductive health, but also your sexual health as a woman, that you don't have a choice in having enjoyment. You're not supposed to have enjoyment. You're not supposed to. So that is something that's a campaign that definitely we support. We don't have much of it in South Africa and may not be able to relate to it quite strongly. But when people come to us and tell us their experiences and say, all we want is a right to have the freedom to do this, it makes it quite a very important thing. And of course, it also makes you susceptible. And now I'm speaking also not objective. I'm not objective at this matter. I'm being subjective because we don't have it a lot in South Africa. So I don't feel that I have the right to necessarily champion the cause of it. And so I'm just putting that disclaimer there, so that, you know, if somebody is out there and they want to, you know, rebut, they can rightfully say so. But one of the things that come out quite strongly with regards to that is that you want to have the choice to, of course, enjoy sexuality, but also it's taken quite young. It's not done to women who are of ability to make choice. It's done to women that are very young girls. And that's a really, it dehumanizes a person, removes the ability to make choices, and also removes the childhood nature of it, and also makes them prone to sexual violation, because now you are not there as a person who's meant to have agency in sexual intercourse or in consent or anything of that sort. You are there just to be a tool. You know, I saw somebody quoting Dineo Majavu yesterday. She said, in the ball of patriarchy, in the game of patriarchy, we're not the opposing team, we are the ball. And I found it quite interesting. I think that mutilation basically says you are just the ball. You are just there to be played around with. And that's something that we must definitely, women must have agency in whatever decision they take in terms of reproductive health, and have the necessary support where needed. You also spoke about intimate partner violence, which is very important. I think this speaks to a number of things. We know that love or relationships themselves are not just isolated from class struggle. All of these things that we're speaking about class struggle and the impacts of capitalism on these relations. And if it's a socialized thing that speaks about this relationship between one person and another that has to do with power as well, then the issue is a problem, because it's about power relations. So Clara Zetkin, when she was thinking about this day of International Working Women's Day, wasn't thinking about it. She didn't think about it outside of course, the material conditions of women fighting for themselves. But more than anything, she was saying, don't forget that the existence of capitalism and how it impacts us. And then Gramsci also tells us how it culturally comes in. And I'm mentioning these things because when we think about intimate partner violence, we can't think about it in isolation of one power relations and the impact of class expectations on relationships and on men and women that have forced certain parts of culture to continue the way that they do. So a man saying your worth as a woman is the amount of children that you have is based on these existing cultural norms that are hegemonic, that only reinforce this capitalist narrative. Same thing with the fight between of whether you have children or not. He should have a choice because I married you, and we have lobola, which has been, I'm not debating it today, but I've lobolaed you, therefore I should be in charge of your body, so you can't take these things without. And I mean, that is the worst thing. I think the society, the way that it's created, has made it difficult for women to choose not to have children, but also for women to choose to have children. So on both ends, you are literally policed by a society that has no care of who you are. But so I think that those two aspects are very important, and when we think about them, we must never I don't think we should avoid them from class struggle and the impacts of capitalism on relations, on our thinking of how society should be, on our thinking of how women should be, on our thinking of how men should be. So even if a man doesn't want children, we can't even take him serious. We say, but that the male genitalia is not for show. It must show its use, which is unfair. If a man doesn't want a child, they don't want a child. If people don't want children, they don't want children. And that's okay.
No, I hear you. Comrade KGOMOTSO, I just want to touch base in line with the gender-based violence in the workplace, sexual harassment that takes place in workplaces, and the difficulties sometimes of reporting the abuse that might take place from the gender-based violence of women in the workplace, and where they report, or if there is a comfortable space where that abuse taking in the workplace is actually dealt with in the trade unions platform.
No, thank you very much. I think this is a very, very important question of gender-based violence and harassment in the workplace. It is something that majority of workers are faced with, and it is always difficult for members to report the sexual harassment in particular, because in most instances the harassment is done by those that we report to, and it becomes difficult then to go and report, because the next thing that will come your way is you facing the door and leaving, because you are now challenging someone in authority. That is why we are saying it is mostly difficult to report it. There is no space that allows workers to can say, this particular individual in the workplace, I can go and report this particular matter. Worse, the police stations. You still find it very, very difficult to go and report the issue of sexual harassment. Now, when you get there, you will, in actual fact, when you look at the statistics, it is actually a drop in the ocean, because most cases of sexual harassment are not reported. It's quite a few that gets reported, because you get, threatened that should you report it, this is how we're going to deal with you. Now, the issue of gender-based violence, we come with that from where we stay at, Gender-based violence does not just happen in the workplace, but even where we stay as individuals. And who is expected to protect you, and who is expected to assist you as a worker. If you come from home, you are bitten, you are bleeding, you can't then speak to anyone. It's your employer. There should be a very conducive environment where when you get to work, you are then able to say, I am not able to do the following because this is the situation that I'm confronted with. Because that on its own, it affects your work performance, which at the end of the day makes you, go through processes of disciplinary and a whole lot of things, just because there is no conducive environment in the workplace where you can actually report the issue of gender-based violence.
Yeah.
Recently, COSATU just launched its call center. Will the call center also have hotline where people who feel they don't know the right procedures to go about reporting such violations of gender-based violence or sexual harassment, be part of that COSATU hotline for people that might not necessarily know the process or their rights, but need to voice out and say, hey, I have this problem. I don't know which door to go to. Can I be guided and also be protected when I voice out this certain injustice happening towards me? Oh, and there's water. Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The call center that COSATU has launched will mainly be dealing with worker issues broadly. Firstly, you have what we call unorganized workers, and these workers will have an opportunity to utilize that call center for them to, join the trade unions where they are, within the sectors where they are employed. And that call center will also be an educational, field to the workers. Now, in terms of, the latter part of the question, the call center will then be in a position to educate the members in terms of how do you, maybe you being afraid to raise it within your workplace, but the call center will then be able, to open doors and channels for you to say, go here, this is where you'll get help. But at the same time, they will be working as a link between yourself and where you're supposed to go and actually report the matter.
Okay, no, thank you. I just want to also get into the quota systems in the workplace. Are they really working, or we sometimes get into championing a quota saying we want a woman now and we have a token, then it's like the person that gets into that position, then it'll have 4 years rolled back without another woman coming in because we'll be told that we were given a woman. So is the quota system a token, a kind of position, or is it a serious position where we say we demand these equal positions for women in leadership, women in the workplace, and that should be a continuous held accountable that quota is sustained?
I think the issue of quota system is something that really, for me, is just a token. We talk about it and we are not actually implementing it. If we had implemented it in this particular Congress, the next Congress, we actually reverse what we had actually implemented, because we always talk of the 50-50 or the 40-60, but in most instances, we don't actually, get to implement the quota. And I'm saying this because there are positions which are merit to men, and it should not actually be like that, because if we talk about women emancipation, it cannot be correct that there is a particular position where a woman should not actually, occupy, but it must only be occupied by a male counterpart. A female can only, deputize or take this particular position. And I think it really has to be corrected at some point, because it is not actually taking us anywhere as the labor movement. The positions are there and the quota is just there in paper, and it is not actually, finding any expression. And in most instances, women will also be blamed, that it is you, women, who are actually putting your male counterparts in those positions, and you come back and cry that you are not actually being taken serious. So I think women need to, come together and get an understanding of why should women find, space and representation in leadership positions. Because the other thing that I think, becomes a problem, as a woman, you can be vocal, you can, understand the issues, but that should actually just remain in the boardroom. It should not actually go out there, because the very male counterparts, they will seriously feel threatened that if this one can actually come out and occupy a particular position, then it means one of us is actually going to be removed and this one is actually going to take, particularly the positions that are termed and deemed to be for our male counterpart. So I think the issue of quota must actually be a debate that women, begins to talk about, so that if in this Congress there are 3 females, the coming Congress we must actually add another woman or remain with the 3 instead of, regressing and removing one of the female comrades and replacing that comrade with a male comrade.
Thank you. I think I'll also throw it to Comrade Dineo around that issue, especially in our organization, the Young Communist League of South Africa and the ACCP, and in just general politics, and also young females occupying space.
Yeah. I find it really interesting. I'm so inspired by what you're saying, Inti. And I find it really interesting because the labor movement has been one that has... it really inspired some form of movement throughout society. When we're looking at the International Working Women's Day, February 1917, the February Revolution came from women, 1917 October that we look at, it started with the women in February that were hit by the Tsar. And then this day also it was women. So women have been fighting for bread and butter for the longest of time. 1973, Durban strike, was women at the forefront, right? And then also in the 1970s, the GAU, the Government Workers Union, MAU, they had female general secretaries. That was quite an interesting time. They had female general secretaries, and I mean, and women were very strong. In fact, just before in 1990, just before that, Emma Mashinini leads a team that fights for maternity leave and gets this beautiful thing that still exists called Pick and Pay, where women now have 12 months maternity leave and nice things. But when it comes to leadership, post that, she's not considered. And I mean, I don't know what happened. I mean, I wasn't there, but I'm interested in where the change comes in. You know, Ruth First was the national secretary of the YCL. We thinking about her as, I mean, now in February she did a lot of work around this. Phoebe Botterton and a number of other women led the Youth League and other. So exactly where does it change? When did it change is my big question. When did women now have to be relegated to other positions and not strategic or just a number situation? And for me, it's quite interesting that post-democracy in particular, post-1994, there was a different perception around one woman fought to be within the organizations, which we appreciate, and we appreciate that in terms of the quota system. But if we can't have the quota system really dealing with the crux of changing the masculine aspect of leadership, then we are missing it. It mustn't just be about having women within the leadership, which is very important. Though there must never be regression at all, because that's an important gain. But now we must speak to the qualitative aspect of it, because we have women that have been qualitative. We had the biggest rise of women before this, just before the 1970s, before FOSATU was formed, you know, during FOSATU. And as we went into COSATU, we saw that regression. Same thing with the YCL. Post 2003, we haven't had a female national secretary. I mean, we've only had, four? Comrade Buti, Comrade Mlu, now Comrade Mzandile. But and Comrade Dineo. So it's four males. But what is missing? Is something missing? Is it that women are not? And these questions, for me, women are capable. They are very capable. It's our ideas of what leadership looks like that are a problem, both males and females, and what that requires. That we need to start unlearning. And like Clara did. Clara, when she came with this International Working Women's Day, it was when people were saying, let's have an International Workers' Day. She says, yeah, you can't, we hear the issues of workers, but remember that even though I'm not making this between men and women, let's also have an International Working Women's Day, because they were huge in the influence of having this day. So as we go into May Day, we can't move the face of women. And we shouldn't do that in every political space.
So what role does social conditioning play in women holding back in actively participating in leadership role, or actually being used as tools to prevent women into ascending into important roles? Because women themselves also, because of the social conditioning of patriarchy and all that, some unaware, they become used as a pawn to stop the progression of a woman to occupy a space and open the space for more women to get into there. So I just want us to talk about the conditioning, social conditioning, and how or what can be done to shake that off, and to ensure that women actually stand up for women and stand up together as women against anyone who's trying to put a wedge against the unity of women.
If you don't mind, Inti, I'll start first. I think for me, it's one, the conditions that have created the political environment in particular being more male-dominated. If you want to have the best meeting for nurses or retail workers, you have to think about the time that the person has to come in and when they have to leave. So there have been leaders like NT who have fought the tides of time, but also had to sacrifice a lot of their experiences of life, because there was just sacrifice. You had to be involved. You had to be you had to run. You had to run around. There was no time. Nobody's going to say, oh, you have a child. So I do think that the movement has not made the organization a space that can accommodate women or different forms of care. So I do think that we need to change that socialization. The movement has to be a space where care work is socialized, and where the highest level of participation of women just before 1994, as women were coming in. At least I heard this from Comrade Jenny, so if I'm incorrect, I must just mention it. She says, at that time I was like 2, but in any case, she says that they used to have meetings at Shell House, and those meetings they used to have care services. So you'd come in and you'd bring your child, and there would be a care service. So it would change the dynamics. You have enough time to focus on the discussion. That's the first thing. The second one is that also, I know that we when we're thinking about women and being able to move past these socialized aspects, is that we have to agree that the economic burden lies with women. So these things are not without using. Capitalism is a silly thing because they're not without these things. They give money, they give some form of help that you don't have for yourself. So therefore, we need to ensure the public ownership of goods, but goods in ensuring that women have enough access to goods so that they can sustain themselves beyond anyone, whether it's another woman or it's another man trying to force something on them because of money. And I also think that because that's something that's socialized. If a person comes to me and you say to me, Auntie says to me, hey, Dineo, here's 2 rand, and I don't have 2 rand. And she says, no, here's 2 rand, let's shut thingy up, I'll probably take it if my situation is that I haven't had 2 rand for the whole year. So the material conditions need to change. But also lastly, it's about also changing our mentality around what leadership looks like, and also taking it. But the thing is, we know it. When we go to our community meetings, or when you're having a shop floor meeting, there's usually that woman that we know is the one that organizes everybody. So we know it in the micro spaces. What happens in micro must reflect in the macro. It must reflect. And where we are numerically strong and have the powers to, we must also reflect that. I don't think that at the same time, we must only say that women are just socialized badly. Even men are done so, and patriarchy, unfortunately, permeates all of our lives. So it does take a lot of unlearning, but I do think that there are a lot of women that are still chanting for other women. That's the reason why we are here. We are under the wings of comrades like Comrade NT, who continue to always pull women up as they move. So even despite some people that may not, because of whatever situation that they do, we mustn't forget those that do good and appreciate that movement.
Auntie?
Okay. I think the biggest problem here is patriarchy. It is actually, its ugly head is always up, to put women down and, make them feel that they are not able, yet they know their strength. And I think, bringing women together and not, getting tired to educate women and take them along in terms of understanding their capacity and their capabilities. Because when we talk of, women occupying a position, we don't just mean, taking any woman and put that woman there and make that woman fail. Those women, as and when we identify them, we must then make it our responsibility to make sure that they don't fail, they execute, and there should be that constant, development to make sure that there is, proper representation of facts and what the position, requires them. And I think one thing that maybe is of critical importance to me, it's, always holding hands or, bringing along young women into the space. Because tomorrow I may not actually be here. How do I then make sure that there is that succession plan in terms of, making sure that tomorrow when I'm not here, there is another woman who will be able to come in without actually any difficulty and run with the responsibility. But it does not actually also mean that we are saying men must actually be in the periphery and not be part of this particular subject, but women must make sure that they come together and make sure that this young woman who just entered the world space, the space of work, they must actually be made to understand what is this that women leadership is all about and what it entails, because it does not just come, easy. There are challenges, there are difficulties, but they need to be taken through, they need to be taken along for them to understand that, yes, there were women who, marched in 1956. It is not because they woke up and decided to, go to Pretoria, but they set, they planned, they, looked at who is actually the one who can actually lead this particular march. Mm-hmm. Now, our succession plan should then begin to look at those young ones who will then be in a position to can actually take the baton and run with once we are not there.
Your words echo Mam Charlotte Maclega's words to say, when you rise, bring a woman along with you, so that you don't close the space. As the only woman who entered, then you close the space. I think, Comrade NT, you touched upon the fact that the woman's struggle is not only for women. It's all of us that needs to partake in this. If one looks at all of us here today talking about the International Women's Day, it's only 3 women who are sitting here. I just want you to highlight in terms of the importance that it is not a stereotypical, the fact that only women can champion woman emancipation, and the fact that even gender officers can also be males along just around that.
Yeah, I think for me it's a subject that probably we must have. Because this subject most of the time, Comrade Dineo, we tend to talk about us as women, forgetting that there's other gender, there's another gender that, we must walk this path together with. Mm-hmm. And I think that is why, most of the time you find the challenges when you come to spaces where you must identify a female comrade to enter or take a leadership position. And we need to start educating. And I think I've said, education and educating many a times, in this interview, that when you look at our discussions, when we talk on gender matters, we tend to then shift the gender discussion and make it a woman discussion. Yet when we talk of gender, we need to encompass all the genders, including the LGBTQI community, because there's another community that is there, and we seem to be completely forgetting and removing them in our discussions, yet they are also part of us. But I think that it's a discussion that we really need to continuously have, so that it doesn't feel like we are closing this other gender outside, but we need to walk, and we must walk this journey together, because we need each other.
Thank you for bringing the LGBTQI plus community. Comrade Dineo, I just want to talk about from that community where access to gender reinforcing hormones that they need to take so that they can be aligned with the agenda that they identify with, and the access to those programs, the mental health issues that they suffer from, the lack of understanding from the background of our cultural background, or just how society has been conditioned around that, that gender reassignment surgeries, that community also is still fighting for those rights to be accessible and to be normalized. Also looking into how that was also part of a major campaign for Trump around the rights of the LGBTQI plus community. Can you just take us around all of that?
Yeah, no, that's a very, I just wanted to start by a story maybe. There's this young lady who was born with the sex of a boy, got into university, started having he was very clear. She had made a decision that she wants to start looking like a woman, and I'm saying she because she prefers that pronoun. But the moment she got into university, she was forced into a res that's male. She didn't have access to the hormones, and therefore was forced to go. She was forced to go into the black market. And in going into the black market, she unfortunately faced two things: mental health issues, as you correctly say, but the other issue is that those things really messed up her body. She had other now diseases and issues that she had to deal with. But lastly, she was also kicked out of her home and ultimately had to sell her body for sexual favors in Yeovil. This was a young person that was at UJ and now has left and is in a home that we also support as the YCL here, or formerly did as the YCL here in Johannesburg. But what's quite interesting about that story is that it tells you about the problems of just not being able to have the right to choice. We always say that the private is political, or it should be public, and etc. But we don't want it to come right when it comes to issues of choice, when it comes to issues of being able to have access to the necessary healthcare facilities. We put people's lives in danger. We are unable to even think about their safety, because his safety, when he went to an all-male res of people that did not understand her conditioning, put her in a very difficult space, and even the gentlemen that were in the res. So this is a very important matter, and the YCL has been taking it up. One, we believe that you should have access, and that's one of the reasons why we call for NHI, one of the reasons why we're very strong on the issues of reproductive rights. When we speak about reproductive rights, we're saying let us be able to reproduce ourselves in the way that we feel fit, regardless of what gender you consider that I am. And also my sexual preference should be mine. It should not be something that we discuss, or it shouldn't have to have an agreement by the public society.
We have just a few minutes left, and I think I'll just take up one a question that both of you kindly would be kind to answer. The question is, how does economic inequality reinforce gender oppression?
I can start. I think for me, I believe that, like we've said the whole time, that just really economic inequality, neoliberalism, the austerity impacts women the most. If there's no access to food, that means care workers put into difficult process. So it reinforces a culture of dependence. One, it reinforces cultures of patriarchy. If women don't have access to jobs and are not able to be economically strong, it reinforces patriarchal norms of power and ownership. So the economic development and the economic liberty, well, the crushing of capitalism and the public ownership of goods, and of course the empowerment and the socializing of care work is for the benefit of women. In fact, when I wanted to speak to mention this, because this is the last statement that we're making in the original resolution of the day, the Congress took this agreement. It says, in agreement with the class-conscious political and trade union organizations of the proletariat, their respective countries, socialist women of all nationalities have to organize to Special Women's Day, which must, above all, fight for the class struggle against capitalism and the female suffrage. So it was the class-conscious political conditions that understood that the economic development is very important. We cannot fight for women or any oppressed without fighting against those that own the means of production. We must have classless societies, and it must be based on the means of production. Yeah, as socialized ownership of the means of production.
Yeah, I think for me, there must be equal pay for the work of equal value. It should not be treated like, this one is a male, this one is a female, therefore the issue of the wage should be different. So it will be very important that the pay gap is then addressed.
Just so that we close, how far are we with tackling the triple oppression of women in South Africa?
I don't think we are trying as a country to tackle the issue of the triple oppression, but it is still not visible in terms of, how are we actually occupying the space. I'll speak on, issues of farming. When you go to the farmers or to the farming sector, instead, when you get there, women are the most, oppressed. And I think we really are still lacking. And the issue of triple oppression, and as Dineo has said, we need to look at how then do we make sure that as people that are, putting food on the table are being taken care of, how do we then occupy that space? If I can be given a hectare of land for me to start farming, how many families am I going to feed? How many job opportunities am I going to create? So I think we really need to do more in making sure that this particular aspect of triple oppression is actually attended to.
Yeah, I'm in full agreement. But I also think that we can't, we won't win this under capitalism. No. Me, I'm very clear on that. We have to break the system. But also I'm aware that we have to have this, we're not maybe ready to break it, maybe because there's no revolution, the working class maybe not ready for the revolution moment. So every step, like you're saying, Inti, is very important, and that's the one thing we learned from unions and the working class is that some gains may not seem like the biggest, but fight for them and protect them, so that when you go to the next level, you are able to move forward. So let's fight for what has been. Ensure that the maternity rights are protected. Ensure that access to UIF is freer. Ensure that companies actually make it a law that they must pay actually for that 4 months without even government doing it itself. We must fight for those things, protect them, Macro wants to rescind their labor maternity, so we must fight those things. We must protect the issues of quotas and make them more realistic. But at the same time, never forget to learn, like NT was saying, always conscientize, fight for public goods, always ensure that we fight for NHI, progressive things that ensure that they uplift women and strengthen them. But under capitalism, of course, it's going to have its problems. Yeah.
So tomorrow is the 8th of March. So I just want to give both of you an opportunity just to perhaps just announce to us any programs that you'll be participating or any programs that the organizations are embarking on for tomorrow.
Well, we don't have anything tomorrow, but we have something on Sunday. The SACP in the Ndajabane district will have a talk with our PC member Pamela Maleo, the deputy provincial secretary, and then we'll also have Zanele Matebola there, who will then come in and have a discussion around International Working Women's Day, as well as some of the impacts that we can have. But we know that there's a number of things happening within the district. We're continuing with our day-to-day activities around going to clinics, which is something that's important for us, ensuring that they're accessible, especially the 24-hour ones, providing the necessary care.
Yeah, with us, I think it is the same, that tomorrow there'll be a number of events happening in different places, but in the main, we had an event in the Free State today of COSATU. So we will see tomorrow where do we, go to and celebrate this very important day of women.
For the SACP National Office, they'll be having a campaign tomorrow at Bulukwane in the New Look Primary School, Extension 71, in the sub-district. They'll be having the event at 11. But one thing that I want to say is that international working women's issues are an ongoing discussion. So we could not touch on everything, but I do employ upon all of us to ensure we keep the discussion and the conversations going on. Thank you very much, Comrade KGOMOTSO and Comrade Dineo, for joining us, highlighting all the historical importance, the impact on the social issues and women's rights, and that lot still needs to be done. And this day means so much, and it needs to reactivate our activism and campaigning and sharpening on the voices of women's rights. To our audience and listeners out there, thank you very much for joining us today. Please do follow us on our social media pages on Facebook, also on our YouTube channel, and also do click on the notification button so that you do get notified on the following episode. From us here on the Red Mic Podcast Studio, goodbye.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.
Thanks. Are we done?
All right, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.